Hey everyone, I'm Norm. Welcome to Breaking Back, a tennis podcast by fans, for fans, covering all aspects of the game with an unfiltered lens. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Peter and Chris. Welcome to Breaking Back.
Thank you for giving us some time and joining our podcast today, René. Really happy that a mutual friend, John Butler, introduced us. He seems to have quite a web of contacts in the sports world. And when you and I initially talked, I came into the conversation thinking, great, tennis coach, let's talk tactics and NIL and things like that. And I quickly pivoted right into your world. And I think what's most passionate to you is really getting the most out of these young men that you're working with. And so that's really what Chris and I would love to talk about more is that how you come at that, how you apply your experience to coaching in a very different way from probably most of your peers.
Sure. Well, first, guys, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Just shoot away. I mean, any questions that you have, I'm happy to share my experience and how I approach things.
Okay.
Just for the sake of, the people that can't see or know who you are, if you could just give us a little brief introduction of what you do, who you are, that sort of thing, that'd be awesome.
Sure. I mean, I'm currently the head coach of men's tennis at NIU. I'm a 7-time NCAA conference championship coach at 4 different universities, from Boise State to Colgate to Mississippi State, and to most recently McKendree, just outside of St. Louis. And now we're working on similar goals here at NIU.
Excellent. What division is NIU? Is it D1 or D2?
We are D1.
Yeah, that was the one thing that popped out at me on your resume is that top 25 finish, which is really impressive. And especially in the context of what you and I talked about, how, there are the big schools that are drawing millions of dollars in all this money to support their program. And I imagine it's, much different at a smaller D1 school like yours. So that only emphasizes your ability to get the most out of the talent that you have. So very impressive. I guess the first question I have is, when you're recruiting somebody, what's part of your sales pitch on getting someone to your school? Because I would think, given, kind of like your 4 pillars around tennis, right? And being able to really own that and help with the mental part would be a huge selling point. But how do you get them to show up for your program?
Well, I think it starts with a set of core values. So when I think of recruiting, I have what I call the 3 C's. So I'm looking for character, I'm looking for competence, and I'm looking for chemistry. I'm looking for those 3 things. So, if you start with character, I'm looking for somebody that I can trust, not only personally, but on the court, under pressure. I'm looking for somebody that has a strong work ethic, just someone who maybe comes from as solid of a family background as possible. And that's all over the board, so we have athletes, and I've been working with players from all over the world, literally over the last 20 plus years. Competence is all about your talent, what you bring to the table, just in terms of results, your upside in terms of technique and tactics, your openness to learn and to get better. And chemistry is what it is. It's that level of communication, seeing if there's a connection there where we can really work together and make something special happen. So it starts with that. So I always lead with my core values, and every coach might have their own set or leader of sort of beliefs and what's important for them. But those 3 pillars, so to speak, have sort of been a filter for me, in terms of weeding out certain people and keeping people in the circle, of the recruiting game. I think as far as, look, we're all in sales. You ask, what's our sales pitch? I think to be a great coach, to be a great leader, whether it's in sports or business, you have to embrace sales and you have to embrace promotion. If you have fear around that and selling yourself and selling your program or selling your company, you're going to struggle because, I think with social media, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, there's so much noise out there that you have to find the few ways that you can stand out from everybody else. So what does that look like specifically for me? as a coach, well, I mean, in my bio, in my email, it's right there under my name is 7-time NCAA championship coach. So we can start with that conversation and what that looked like. And, for me, that's a metaphor. That's a metaphor for saying, hey, you put René Vidal in any situation at any university. It doesn't matter if it's a private school, if it's a public school, if it's D1, D2, D3. I've coached at all three levels in the last 5 to 7 years. It's insane that this guy's going to find a way to win. So I think it's just starting there, starting with core values, leading with credibility and this sort of winning mantra and saying, hey, this is our vision. This is what we're about. This is what I do. And I believe that you and your talent, from what I've seen, can really help us do amazing things. And we start there and we go and we see where the conversation leads.
How much time do you spend with a recruit? Whether it's watching them play, maybe watching video to get a feel for the competency. But then I'm more curious about character, right? Because I just left a meeting before this call for work where we're doing this gang interview with a potential candidate. There's 4 of us. It's a really rigorous process. And you think, man, does it really need to be this thorough? And absolutely you do, right? You want to get somebody that you're going to commit to, right? Financially and otherwise. You're placing a bet. So you want to make sure it's a solid bet. So the character piece, I think, is really the real dynamic that you have to get at.
I mean, I think they're all important. To be completely candid, that you need talent. You're not going to win without the talent. If you don't have the communication there, it's going to be tough going to practice every single day and really trying to build something. So to me, they all work together. But of course, the character piece, look, one of my favorite sayings is it's greater to be trusted than it is to be loved. So that's my character sort of approach. As a coach, I value respect over popularity. So you have to be willing to sacrifice a few friends, for the end result and the end goal. And when you're in a coaching and a leadership role, you're naturally pushing people to do things that are uncomfortable, that they don't want to do. So you're not going to make friends, and you're not always going to be liked, and you have to be comfortable and confident in that. And I feel like that's a part of character. It takes time. I've had the benefit of experience now, having done this for a couple of decades, whereas when you're in your 20s, you think you know everything, but you don't know anything. You mentioned how much time do I spend with recruits. It's a little bit different for everybody. I'm at a university now where we're fairly reliant on international student athletes. And at McKendree, to compete and to be the best version of ourselves, we were almost completely geared towards international recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit different than some of my friends that are at universities that can really go aggressively after top US players. I haven't been to a national event in a long time, like a national junior event, because it's just not relevant.
They're not there. Yeah, right.
It's not relevant for us.
Yeah.
So my recruiting is virtual. It's setting up calls. It's looking at data. It's looking at UTRs. It's working with agents that represent players, and building those relationships. And it's kind of nice. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of nice. In the summer, I don't have to worry about traveling and going to this tournament and that tournament. And I think the level of intensiveness is lower than a lot of my friends. I mean, they're recruiting players 2 and 3 years out. At McKendree, I was recruiting players 2 and 3 months out. I was like, look, right. I need somebody for January.
Right.
It's October. And if we can get 1 or 2 more players this January, we're good,
right.
And then I'm looking towards the fall. It's never been really a 12-month window in the last 5 years. And I say it smilingly because so many of my friends are in a completely different boat. And it would be interesting to switch places there. And I've done that before. When you're building relationships over time, you're working the parents, you're working the family, you're doing all of those things. And now it's just completely different. For me, anyway, where I am right now. So to swing to the character piece, I think that's where I lean a lot on just my gut instinct.
Sure.
When you see someone on the phone or on video and you're talking for 5, 10, 15 minutes, you just know the questions to ask, and you're looking at body language, and you're just paying attention to energy level and just things like that. There's not a magic pill to it. I just come to a place where I trust my instinct, and I feel like I'm pretty good with people, and I know what I'm looking for. I think I'm very clear about the character, the chemistry, the competence, those things. So I'm going in already, and like, I know what I want. I'm just kind of seeing, like, what are you going to give me? And is this worth our time going forward?
Right.
That being said, I mean, time management is a huge piece of my philosophy. And I consider myself a little bit of a time ninja. So even with players that I coach currently, when we have player development meetings, they're scheduled for 15 minutes. Like, we're going to get done what we need to get done in 15 minutes. Do they go over sometimes? Yeah, occasionally, not much. And I found, like, you're not losing anything there. You're gaining, because this current generation, the 20 somethings, they're all about brevity. They're all about, the text that's 2 words and 2 letters and those kinds of things.
Right.
So I think for me, it's a form of showing them respect and saying, hey, I respect your time, and we have a specific goal here. Let's talk about it. Tell me how you feel. Tell me your thoughts. This is where I'm coming from. And then we're off to the races, getting back on the court where the real work is done on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you have several, I know you've written a book about overcoming adversity. That's a topic that I'm sure comes up again and again in coaching. Looking at the 3 C's, and if you're working with players or other coaches, if, sure, you've dealt with people that are in a state of functional freeze where they can't find the door to get out. What would you advise, or how do you coach somebody to sort of get through the blockage and go to the other side? Because even if somebody has the most astute character, they're an incredibly talented and competent player, and they're the kind of person you want to run to the bar and have a beer with. Everyone has aspects of their life, or forces that they can't control, that puts them in a place where they just simply don't know what to do next. Where do you sort of coach that person into a better place?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things to do is to start off and to let that person know that I've been in that situation several times. And if it's appropriate, maybe asking permission if I can share a story or two.
Sure.
Start that way. I think to build rapport and say, hey, I'm not coming to you as the perfect coach, the ideal leader, the one who's never made any mistakes. I'm coming to you as the guy whose dad taught him tennis at 5 years old and was his tennis director at the outset. And then this is the guy who lost his dad at 13 and really wasn't able to fulfill his tennis potential and his tennis dreams, and then had to figure out, who's my next mentor going to be? Who can I look to for wisdom and advice? So I think starting there and sharing and not being afraid to be vulnerable with my own story, that's how I approach it. That's step 1. I think step 2 would be, hey, to share the down 40 love philosophy, right? Down 40 love is a tennis metaphor for turning adversity into competitive advantage, or even better yet, turning setbacks into bounce backs. And on the tennis court, from a competitive standpoint, when you're down 40 love, I mean, you're up shit's creek. Like, that's not a good situation.
Right.
And the reality is most players just throw in the towel and they're already looking towards the next game. But I think the players that really maximize their own potential, they dig in. They see that as an opportunity to turn things around and to dig in. It's that simple. But then the question is, well, how do you do that? Because you can't make up 3 points just to get to even, right? Just to get to deuce in 1 point, just like that. You can only focus on 1 point, 1 play, 1 swing at a time. And I think when you're talking about overcoming adversity, that's the reality. You're not going to turn around what could be a terrible situation or maybe a significant setback in 1 day. It takes 1 moment, 1 minute, 1 hour, a half a day at a time, doing the right things, turning the negative voice that's in our head over to the positive side. It's developing winning habits, understanding that maybe we're in our own way. What can we do? What can we control to improve the situation. So I think it's those three things, just building rapport. I think it's very important for people that are going through a tough time to not play the victim and not to believe that they're the only ones that have ever faced the situation that they're going through.
Yeah.
Because frankly, to be a tough love coach, I'd say, like, who do you think you are that you think you're the only one on this planet that's been through that? You think you're the only one who's been through a divorce. You think you're the only one who's been fired. You think you're the only one who's lost a tennis match or didn't reach your goal as a team, as aspiring as it may have been. Like, get out of yourself.
Yeah.
Wake the what up and let's get going. Let's put a real plan together, that's going to help you realize your God-given potential, and stop effing around. So that's another piece. So, depending on who the person is sitting in front of me, the style can change and how you go about helping someone flip a setback into a bounce back is completely dependent on that relationship and the individual.
Yeah, I think about, two things come to mind. One, I know Pat Cash was always famous for drilling starting at Love 40 when he practiced. Like, he put himself in those situations so he was comfortable being, serving right at Love 40, returning at Love 40 and having incremental gains. This is almost like, trite at this point, but Rafa Nadal, right? I mean, the guy just loved, he would forget the score because he was so into point to point, right? And I know I'm terrible at projecting, right? Like in life, and it's really bad in tennis, right? To get beyond where you're currently, what you're facing. But that mentality of being in the moment, focusing on that next the next right step, the next movement is really, it's a challenge, but it's so clarifying if you can get people to that state.
Absolutely. I mean, we want to be grounded in reality, but if the current reality is not what we want or we're in a bad place, we can't stay there. You can't focus on it. I mean, what we focus on tends to expand, and that's good or bad. So, it's up to us every day to choose our mindset, to choose our perspective, how we're going to view things. And I think more importantly, to take action, because when we stand still, everybody else continues to keep moving. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. So I think, people should just never lose hope. What it takes is to look to others who have been in your situation and have overcome whatever it is you're going through. Lean on that, lean into that as much as possible. Get those folks on the phone, ask them questions, pick their brains, read their books, do whatever you need to do, because the answers are out there. They're inside of you, but maybe you can't hear them right now. So then go outside, and find some solutions there, whatever it takes to get you moving.
I don't have any follow-up to that. That's the best sage advice I think anyone could offer. What do you think, Norm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really relevant to, I talk about, so René, both of our boys, Chris and I both have boys that are around the same age, 22, and just taking very, is he 20? Yeah. Very different paths in life, and I love, they're both having great success, but very different ways about, doing it. I think it's worth kind of going into that a little bit, Chris, and kind of getting René's take on certainly Baxter's experience. I think it's remarkable.
Yeah, my son, when he was a senior in high school, made it very clear to his mother and I that he did not want to go to college. And, as a college graduate, my wife's a college graduate, we were, it's a bit terrifying, especially, in our environment. That's just not the path that many kids would take. It's almost a given that they would matriculate onto college in some way, shape, or form. He was very firm in his decision. And the biggest fear of that is that they drift into a sort of a listless, rudderless existence with no goals, hopes, aspirations. And he started his own company the day after he finished high school, detailing cars. And within a year, he went from having, everything out of the trunk of a sedan to operating 2 vans with employees and, setting himself up basically across the eastern half of Massachusetts as the top mobile detailing business. And it's all based on his drive and whatever his mother and I, established for him in the home as a way to see there's nothing you can't put your mind to and accomplish. You just have to simply have the desire and the drive to get there. He's had setbacks. He has things that happen all the time, but it's how you deal with the setbacks, to your point, that really separates people from being successful or to simply staying in the same place. And to such an extent that he's kind of thrown my parenting back at me of late, and which is, makes me feel really good on one hand, and it makes me feel kind of a slight bit of shame on the other. But compared to my daughter, who's taking the traditional path, she's in college, she wants to sort of further herself in that manner, which I think is great. They're two very different kids, but it is very interesting how somewhere along the line, he picked up the basics, the character, the competence, and the chemistry. He acquired that. He was a tenacious alpine skier in high school. He's a 3-time state champion. He has the internal drive. But as you get older and as you grow, channeling that drive and finding a way, where you can put it is another thing.
I mean, that's a great story, and kudos to you for your adaptability, right? I mean, I think we live in a society that wants to put everybody in a box. So when I hear a story of entrepreneurship like that, as it relates to your son, I mean, I'm clapping. I'm saying, hey, go. And I'm a college coach. I work with student athletes, right? I mean, shouldn't I be waving the flag for going to college? But I think at the end of the day, and in the tennis context, I call it individual player development. I mean, I don't think you can be a great coach if you don't understand what makes each player tick. You can't treat everybody the same, right? So, as you said, Chris, I mean, your son was bent towards going in one direction and your daughter is moving in a slightly different direction. And whether you're a parent, you're a coach, you're a CEO, it all starts with understanding the people around you. And I think if you're really good at what you do, you're going to find ways to empower them to be the best version of themselves. You're not going to look to try to put them in a box or just go along with the status quo.
Maybe this is a bit of a softball question, but I'm curious, what about talk about your relationships with these student athletes after they graduate? And maybe some have had, great success in the tennis court, but I imagine most, like any athlete, right, have had to turn to something else. And I'm wondering if they come back to you for guidance, advice, you remain a part of their lives. And what's that like for you as a mentor?
Yeah, I think it takes intention on both sides. And I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, everything's moving so fast with technology and social media. And there's just a lot of things going on and everyone is living their own lives that I think when you talk about the relationships going beyond just the coach player, you have to be super intentional. Now, that's something that I'm working on every single day. I am lucky to have some players that stay in touch, on WhatsApp and they check in and things like that. There's other players I wish that they would. Mm-hmm. And, time is money for everyone, not just for me. So, you want to set aside time to keep those relationships going, to check in while also, being productive in your other areas. So I'm doing my best with that. It's really nice when it happens. I mean, I've had a couple of conversations this year in 2025 with players that I coached recently that I don't coach anymore. Okay. And it was awesome to get together and to catch up with them and to serve as a resource. I open up my network to any player who wants access, in terms of job opportunities and professional growth, pivots and things like that. But I would say it's an intentional game. Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, you've got everybody coming over on the holidays, all of your former players, and you're celebrating you and you're kicking back and you're talking about the good old days. But I think it's tough in my position right now. It's tougher, I think, because so many of the players go back to their home countries.
Right.
So a lot of the relationships, they're virtual, they're online, things like that. Where some of my peers have it a little bit easier, they're working with US players and maybe some of them are local and things like that. So they can build the relationships with the families and things like that and stay connected. So it's different for everyone. But I think it is very important I think it's one of the things that makes coaching and leadership special is the ability to build lifelong relationships, not just for 4 years or not just for the few years that maybe someone was a part of your company. But if you can build a relationship that goes beyond that, that's what it's really about at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're just kind of a transactional person. Like, okay, you're here for 2, 3, 4 years. We're here to get a result. Let's get the results. We either got the results or we didn't get the results. Have fun. I'm here if you need me. Give me a call, that kind of thing. It's pretty superficial. So it takes effort like anything else, like any relationship. If you want to, whether you want to be the mentor or if you're the mentee, it takes effort, I think, on both sides to keep that relationship going.
Yeah, well said.
We've gone a little bit over time, but if you have just a couple more minutes for one more question, I'd love to know, in bringing this back into the present day world of tennis, as a coach, what kind of advice would you give a player like Nick Kyrgios?
Well, I don't follow Kyrgios that closely. I think he actually did an amazing job as a commentator.
Oh, yeah, we agree. It's phenomenal. Yeah.
That's his calling. And I think the game needs somebody fresh like that who just comes out in a hoodie, doesn't care, does his thing. I mean, if I was having coffee with him, I would just ask him questions around like what drives him right now, and where does he see himself in 2, 3, 4 years? And maybe what's the story that he would want to tell his kids and his family, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and just kind of like get to know the guy because I don't know him. I mean, and I didn't really follow him when he was playing full time. So I think I would just be really curious as to what makes him tick right now. He's definitely a little bit of a different breed, and I love that. Even to coach our players at NIU and at any program that I'm affiliated with, and it's all about leaders creating leaders, not followers. So, we want to empower you to be the best version of yourself. And I tell our guys, don't follow me. Don't tell me what you think you want me to hear. I don't want to hear any of that. Push back. If I ask you to do something and you don't think it's the right thing for your game, push back. Nothing's going to happen. Maybe we have an exchange and it's uncomfortable for 30 seconds, but we're going to have a better result at the end of the day if we're completely candid with each other and have that open dialogue. So, I see Kyrgios on the surface as that kind of guy, not afraid to speak his mind, things like that. But from a career standpoint and what his mission is, I have no idea. And that's what I would look to try to unravel at the outset.
I think everybody is almost playing armchair psychologist to Kyrgios, right? And helping that he sees what we've all agreed that he is, almost made to be in that booth to help tennis kind of get to a wider audience and be real and also be able to speak with unbelievable provenance around what he's seeing on the court, right? It's almost like if you watch Pedro Martinez when he's commenting on a Red Sox game, or maybe Tony Romo calling a play before it actually happens, right? I mean, having that kind of mind plugged into what somebody's seeing is such a guide and really opens up, for the audience. So I hope he gets somebody that tells him that and he listens to it.
Can I push back on that a little bit?
Sure.
Kyrgios appears to be the guy that if you tell him to do something, he's going to do the exact opposite. So I think if you want to coach Kyrgios, you let him be, or you at least make him believe that he should be whoever he wants to be, and he has to own whatever decisions. But I also think like it's easy to watch from the outside and say, oh, that person has immense talent in this area. And he could be, or she could be amazing in this area. But you don't know what's going on inside. You don't know if he's in front of the camera and maybe inside he's like, I don't really love this. This is, even though he's great at it.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on inside just because someone is displaying great results on the outside. And you see it all the time with players in tennis who, remember Marcelo Rios from back in the day who, that guy never looked like he enjoyed tennis.
Right.
And he got to number one in the world, and that was it. It was like end of story. You never heard from the guy again.
Yeah.
He was there for like a week. I don't know. But you never know what's going on inside a person. And that's always been my fascination. I got into coaching really because I thought I was going to be a sports psychologist. So I was always interested in the mental side of the game, and what's more inner than what's going on inside your mind. So yeah, I mean, I think you got to be able to identify folks like that, like the Curioses of the world and sort of the outliers, and say, hey, like, if Curios is going to come and play in our program, we're probably going to make a few concessions to how he trains, things that are going to make him feel good about himself and perform to the best of his ability, which is going to help everybody on the team. And on the surface, a novice coach is going to be like, oh, no, this is my system. This is what we do, blah, blah, blah. And it's like that changes every year depending on your personnel.
Right.
And I think if you want to be effective, you got to be adaptable and you have to be able to sell it to everybody on the team of why we're doing things a certain way now versus 12 months ago, we did things a different way. And just by virtue of communicating these elements, the people in front of you, I think they appreciate that kind of honesty.
Yeah. Leading from the back as opposed to being top down, right? Like that seems to be what's more effective in the 21st century. Standing and yelling or standing and presenting doesn't engage the audience, right? That's just, you're not going to meet them there.
I think it's, yes, I would say, I think it's like 80-20, like it's 80% participatory. Mm-hmm. And then as a coach and as a leader, you need to know when to come in at that 20%. Like there's a video that's gone viral in the last couple of weeks of Rick Pitino in the locker room.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, there's a time and place for that. I mean, if you came out to practice today, you might see a completely different René.
Right.
I mean, maybe not the guy is smiling, joking around. You're going to hear probably a lot of F-bombs. I've been kind to our brand today on the call. And if I was not wearing NIU apparel, there'd probably be a lot more F-bombs all over the place. But there's a time and place. And I think some of it comes with experience. Sometimes it's just you naturally know what to do and how to lead. But for me, it goes to not putting anybody in a box, right? Like, if you're going to put me on the side of, oh, he's a democratic type of coach, then I'm going to show you the other side that's so not democratic. Like, because you got to keep players on their toes. You got to keep people, when you're looking to raise a level of performance, there's a constant state of discomfort that is a part of that process. And as a coach and a leader, you're the one pushing the buttons. You're accountable for that. You're responsible for that. And the best coaches know the right buttons to push on a daily basis.
I wish you would maybe, if you have some time, can you come coach my Wake Forest Demon Deacons basketball team? Because I think they need a little bit of René Vidal.
Absolutely. That's funny. The basketball and football programs could always benefit, I think, from the right kind of motivation. And I think especially, they're the cash cows, the revenue sports, right? So if you can make an impact there, you're going to help a lot of other people and feed a lot of other mouths. But thank you for that. I've heard that a couple of times, actually. I'm like, hey, tennis chose me. Like, if I could do it all again, I would choose football. I would choose basketball, right? Because there's a lot more economic, potential in those areas. But I love what I do. It's fun to help players succeed, on and off the court, to develop leaders on and off the court, which has been my mission for 20 plus years as a coach. So it's fun.
As you said, time is money, René, and we've taken up a lot of your time today. So we really appreciate it. This has been a fascinating conversation. I love that we didn't really touch on too much about tennis because it really is so interesting to hear the stories about overcoming adversity. And I know I'm going to apply this stuff. I'm fired up to get back into my work meetings and manage my team accordingly. So thanks for the boost.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, likewise. I'm walking away with a lot of personal empowerment, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, our audience will appreciate you as well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
All right, René. Enjoy. Good luck with the rest of your season as well. I know it's really just ramping up, but we'll keep an eye on NIU for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bye now.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to Breaking Back on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to follow us on X and Instagram at Breaking Back Pod.